The scream of a horse woke him from his bed, and Benjamin Carter was on his feet with his gun drawn before his eyes, had fully adjusted to the darkness of his small cabin just outside Shoshone, Idaho. The November wind of 1878 howled through the cracks in the wooden walls, and something in his stable was disturbing his animals. He pulled on his boots and coat, grabbed his lantern, and stepped into the bitter cold night. The walk to the stable seemed longer than usual, his breath forming clouds in the freezing air as he crossed the yard with cautious steps. When he pushed open the stable door, lantern held high, he expected to find a coyote or perhaps a bear looking for shelter from the approaching winter storm. Instead, he found a woman curled up in the hay beside his mare, her body trembling so violently he could see it from where he stood. She wore a thin dress that might have been blue once, but was now so covered in dirt and torn in so many places that it was hard to tell. Her dark hair was matted with mud and straw, and her feet were bare and bleeding. Benjamin holstered his gun and approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. As he drew closer, he could see she was young, maybe 22 or 23, with a face that would have been beautiful if it was not so pale and gaunt. Her lips had taken on a bluish tint, and she was not fully conscious, her eyes closed as she shivered in the hay. He knelt beside her and touched her shoulder gently. She did not respond. Her skin was ice cold through the thin fabric of her dress. Benjamin did not hesitate. He scooped her up in his arms, surprised at how light she was, and carried her quickly back to his cabin. The wind had picked up, bringing the first snowflakes of what promised to be a significant storm. He kicked the door open and brought her inside, laying her carefully on his bed near the fireplace. He built up the fire until it was roaring, then turned his attention to the woman. Her breathing was shallow and fast, her body still shaking uncontrollably. Benjamin grabbed every blanket he owned and piled them on top of her, tucking them around her carefully. He heated water on the stove and filled a basin, then gently cleaned the cuts on her feet. Some were deep, and he wondered how far she had walked to end up in his stable. As he worked, he studied her face. Even in her current condition, he could see the delicate features, the long dark lashes against pale cheeks, the curve of her jaw. There was something about her that made his chest tighten in a way he had not felt in years. He shook his head at himself. She was clearly in trouble, possibly running from something or someone, and here he was noticing how pretty she was. Benjamin made himself some coffee and settled into his chair by the fire, determined to keep watch through the night. Outside, the storm picked up in earnest, wind rattling the windows and snow beginning to pile up against the cabin walls. He was glad he had found her when he did. Another hour out in this weather, and she would have frozen to death in his stable. As the night wore on, her shivering gradually subsided, and her breathing became deeper and more regular. Benjamin added wood to the fire and dozed in his chair, waking periodically to check on her. It was nearly dawn when she finally stirred, a small sound escaping her lips. He was at the bedside immediately. Her eyes fluttered open, and he found himself looking into the most striking hazel eyes he had ever seen. They were wide with fear and confusion, darting around the unfamiliar room before settling on his face. "Easy now," he said softly, keeping his hands where she could see them. "You are safe. I found you in my stable last night. You were half frozen." She tried to sit up, and he reached out instinctively to help her, but she flinched away from his touch. He pulled back immediately, holding his hands up. "I am not going to hurt you," he said. "My name is Benjamin Carter. This is my cabin about 5 miles outside of Shoshone. You are safe here." She stared at him for a long moment, and he could see her trying to decide whether to trust him. Finally, she spoke, her voice hoarse and barely above a whisper. "Where are my shoes?" You did not have any when I found you. Your feet were cut up pretty bad. I cleaned them and bandaged them best I could, but you are going to need to stay off them for a few days. She looked down at the blankets covering her, then back at him. Why did you help me? The question caught him off guard. What kind of question is that? You were dying in my stable. What was I supposed to do, leave you there? Most people would have. There was such certainty in her voice that it made something ache in his chest. Well, I am not most people. She studied him for another moment, then seemed to relax slightly. Thank you, Benjamin nodded. Are you hungry? I can make some breakfast. I do not want to be a burden. You are not. I have to eat anyway. He moved to the stove and began pulling out supplies. What is your name? There was a long pause. Natalie Norris. Well, Miss Norris, how did you end up barefoot in my stable in the middle of November? Another pause. Longer this time. Benjamin cracked eggs into a pan and did not push, giving her time to decide how much she wanted to tell him. I was traveling with a wagon train, she said finally. We were headed west from Missouri. There was a man, the wagon master's son. He took an interest in me that I did not return. When I rejected him, he told his father I had stolen from them. They were going to leave me on the side of the trail with nothing. I ran before they could. That was 3 days ago. Benjamin turned to look at her, his jaw tight. They left you out here with no supplies, no shoes, nothing. They were going to take my shoes as payment for the alleged theft. I decided to leave before dawn while everyone was sleeping. That is murder, he said flatly. Leaving someone out here like that. Maybe. She looked away. But there is nothing to be done about it now. He served up the eggs with some bread and brought a plate to her. She took it with trembling hands and ate slowly at first, then faster, as if she could not quite believe the food was real and might disappear if she did not finish it quickly. When did you last eat? He asked. I found some berries yesterday morning. Before that, I had not eaten since I left the wagon train. Benjamin felt anger rise in his chest at the thought of these people leaving a young woman to starve and freeze. He forced himself to stay calm, to focus on what mattered now. You can stay here as long as you need to. I have plenty of food and you need to heal. She looked up at him with those hazel eyes and he saw tears starting to form. Why are you being so kind to me? You do not know anything about me. I know enough. I know you are in trouble and you need help. That is all I need to know. A tear slid down her cheek and she wiped it away quickly. I have nowhere to go, no family, no money. I was traveling west hoping to find work, but now I have nothing. You have time, he said. You do not need to figure everything out today. First, you need to rest and heal. Then we can worry about what comes next. She nodded, and he could see the exhaustion settling over her again. I should not take your bed. You have already done too much. The bed is yours. I will sleep by the fire. I have done it plenty of times before. It was not entirely true, but he said it with enough conviction that she seemed to believe him. Thank you, she whispered again, and he could hear how much the words cost her, how hard it was for her to accept help. Get some rest, he said. I need to go check on the horses and make sure they have enough food and water to get through this storm. He bundled up in his heavy coat and hat and stepped back out into the blizzard. The snow was already several inches deep, and the wind cut through his layers like a knife. He made his way to the stable and spent the next hour tending to his animals, giving them extra feed and fresh water, checking to make sure the stable was secure against the storm. As he worked, his mind kept drifting back to the woman sleeping in his bed. Natalie. There was something about her that had gotten under his skin almost immediately. Maybe it was the vulnerability he had seen when she first opened her eyes. Maybe it was the strength it had taken for her to survive 3 days alone in the wilderness. Maybe it was just that she was the first person to step into his lonely existence in months. and he had not realized how much he missed human company. Benjamin had been alone on this land for 2 years, ever since he had saved up enough money from working cattle drives to buy his own small piece of property. He had built the cabin himself, started a small herd, and lived a quiet, solitary life. He was 26 years old, and most people in town assumed he would remain a bachelor. He had never been particularly good at talking to women, had never felt that spark that other men talked about when they met someone special. Until last night, when he had looked down at a half-frozen stranger in his stable and felt something shift in his chest. He shook his head at himself as he forked hay into the stalls. She was vulnerable and dependent on him right now. Whatever he was feeling, he needed to keep it to himself. The last thing she needed was him making her uncomfortable when she had nowhere else to go. By the time he made it back to the cabin, his hands were numb, and his face felt like it might crack from the cold. He stomped the snow off his boots and stepped inside to find Natalie sitting up in bed, looking much more alert than she had earlier. "The storm is getting worse," he reported, moving to the fire to warm his hands. "We are going to be stuck inside for at least a day or two." "I am sorry to be such an inconvenience." He turned to look at her. "You are not an inconvenience. Stop apologizing." She pressed her lips together, and he could see her fighting the urge to apologize again. It made him wonder what kind of life she had led, that accepting help seemed to cause her so much distress. "Tell me about yourself," he said, settling into his chair. "Where are you from originally?" "A small town in Missouri." "My parents ran a boarding house there." She paused. "They both died last winter. Influenza. I tried to keep the boarding house going, but I could not manage it alone. I had to sell it to pay their debts. That is when I decided to head west. I heard there were opportunities in California for women willing to work hard." "I am sorry about your parents." "Thank you." She looked down at her hands. "What about you? How did you end up out here?" Benjamin leaned back in his chair. "I grew up in Texas. My father worked cattle, and I started going on drives with him when I was 14. After he died, I kept doing it. Spent about 10 years moving cattle from Texas to Kansas and back again. Saved every penny I could, and 2 years ago I had enough to buy this land. It is not much, but it is mine. It must be lonely out here by yourself." "Sometimes," he admitted, "but I like the quiet. I like knowing that what I build here is mine, that I am not working to make someone else rich." She nodded, understanding in her eyes. "That is why I wanted to go west too, a chance to build something of my own." They fell into a comfortable silence, listening to the wind howl outside and the crackle of the fire. Benjamin made them lunch, simple fare of beans and salt pork, but Natalie ate it like it was a feast. He noticed she was careful to finish everything on her plate, not wasting even a crumb. As the day wore on, they talked more. She told him about growing up in the boarding house, about learning to cook and clean and manage difficult guests. He told her about life on the cattle drives, about sleeping under the stars and crossing rivers and fighting off bandits. She was easy to talk to, asking questions that showed she was genuinely interested, laughing at his stories in a way that made him want to tell more. When evening came, he insisted she stay in the bed again, and he made himself a bedroll by the fire. It was not particularly comfortable, but he had slept in worse places. Besides, every time he glanced over at her sleeping peacefully, warm and safe, he felt a satisfaction that made the discomfort worthwhile. The storm lasted 3 days. During that time, Benjamin and Natalie fell into an easy routine. He would wake early to tend the fire and make coffee. She would wake soon after, and they would make breakfast together. During the day, they would talk or read from his small collection of books or play cards. He taught her how to play poker, and she proved to be a quick learner with an excellent poker face. They made meals together, and he discovered she was an excellent cook, able to make even his basic supplies taste delicious. At night, he would sleep by the fire while she took the bed, though he could tell the arrangement bothered her. She mentioned several times that she felt guilty taking his bed, but he refused to discuss it. On the fourth day, the storm finally broke. Benjamin woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the blessed silence of still air. He got up carefully, trying not to wake Natalie, and stepped outside. The world had been transformed into a winter wonderland, everything covered in a thick blanket of white. The sun was brilliant against the snow, making him squint. He spent the morning digging paths from the cabin to the stable and the outhouse, then tending to the horses. When he came back inside, Natalie was up and had made a pot of stew that smelled incredible. "I hope you do not mind," she said. "I found some dried vegetables and meat, and I thought I would make myself useful. Mind, this smells better than anything I have ever made." He ladled some into a bowl and took a bite. It was delicious, rich and flavorful. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" She smiled, and it was the first real smile he had seen from her. It transformed her face, making her eyes light up. "My mother was an excellent cook. She always said that the way to keep boarders coming back was to feed them well. She taught me everything she knew." As they ate, Benjamin found himself thinking about the future. The storm was over, which meant Natalie would probably want to move on soon. The thought made his chest feel tight. He had grown used to her presence over the past few days, used to having someone to talk to, used to her quiet humming while she cooked, used to the way she laughed at his stories. "Your feet are healing well," he said. "Another few days and you should be able to walk without pain." She nodded, her smile fading. "I suppose I should start thinking about what to do next. You do not have to leave right away. You are welcome to stay as long as you like. You have already done so much. I cannot continue to impose on your hospitality. It is not an imposition." He set down his spoon and looked at her directly. "Natalie, I enjoy having you here. The cabin is less lonely with you in it. Stay at least through the winter. It is only November. Traveling in winter is dangerous and you have no supplies, no money. Stay until spring and I can help you figure out where to go from there." She stared at him, her eyes wide. "I could not possibly. That is months away. What would people think?" "I do not care what people think. But if you are worried about your reputation, we can figure something out. Tell people you are my cousin visiting from Missouri. Tell them whatever you want. But please stay." "Why?" she asked softly. "Why do you want me to stay?" It was a fair question, and he owed her an honest answer. "Because in the 3 days since I found you, I have been happier than I have been in the 2 years I have lived here. Because you make this cabin feel like a home instead of just a place to sleep. Because I think you need a safe place to heal and figure out your next step, and I can provide that. And selfishly, because I do not want you to leave." He watched emotions flicker across her face, hope and fear and something else he could not quite identify. Finally, she spoke. "I could earn my keep. I could cook and clean, help with whatever you need. I do not want to be a burden." "You could never be a burden. But if it makes you feel better, yes, we can share the work. I would appreciate having someone who can actually cook." She laughed then, a real laugh that made something warm spread through his chest. "All right. I will stay through the winter. But I insist on doing my share." They shook hands on it, and when her small hand fit into his larger one, Benjamin felt that spark again, stronger this time. From the way her eyes widened slightly, he thought maybe she felt it too. The next few weeks fell into a comfortable pattern. Benjamin would go out each day to tend the horses, check the fence lines, and hunt when the weather allowed. Natalie would keep the cabin clean, cook their meals, and mend their clothes. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire and talk for hours, learning about each other in ways both large and small. He learned that she had always wanted to learn to ride a horse, but had never had the opportunity. He learned that her favorite color was green, that she loved thunderstorms, and that she had a beautiful singing voice that she only used when she thought he could not hear. He learned that she was smart and funny, with a dry wit that caught him off guard and made him laugh. She learned that he was afraid of deep water because he had nearly drowned as a child. She learned that he had a sweet tooth and would eat an entire pie by himself if given the chance. She learned that he was patient and kind, that he never raised his voice in anger, and that he had a way with animals that bordered on magical. December arrived, bringing more snow and shorter days. Benjamin made a trip into Shoshone to buy supplies and found himself thinking about Natalie the entire time. He bought fabric for a new dress, though he worried she might be offended by the gesture. He bought sugar and flour so she could make the cakes and pies she had mentioned loving as a child. He bought a new blanket, softer than the ones he owned, for her bed. When he returned and presented her with the fabric, she stared at it for a long moment, her eyes shining with tears. "Benjamin, this is too much. You need a dress that fits properly and is not torn. Please let me do this for you." She touched the fabric gently, reverently. "It is beautiful, thank you." He helped her set up a space where she could sew, and over the next week he watched as she transformed the fabric into a dress that fit her perfectly. When she wore it for the first time, he had to remind himself to breathe. The green fabric brought out the color in her eyes, and the cut of the dress showed off her figure in a way her old dress never had. "You look beautiful," he said, the words out of his mouth before he could stop them. She blushed, the color rising in her cheeks. "Thank you." The air between them changed after that. The easy companionship they had developed gained an undertone of something more, something electric that made his heart race when she walked into a room. He caught her watching him sometimes with an expression on her face that made him hope she might feel the same pull he felt. Christmas approached, and Benjamin found himself wanting to make it special for her. He made a trip into town again and bought small gifts, nothing expensive but things he thought she would like. He bought her a book of poetry, a jar of honey, and a hair comb made of tortoiseshell. On Christmas morning, he woke to find she had already made breakfast, and there was a package wrapped in brown paper sitting on the table. "Merry Christmas," she said, smiling at him. "You did not have to get me anything." "I wanted to. Open it." He unwrapped the package carefully to find a shirt she had sewn for him from fabric she must have saved from her dress. It fit perfectly, the stitching neat and even. "I noticed your good shirt had a tear in it," she said. "I thought you could use a new one. It is perfect, thank you." He pulled out the gifts he had bought for her. "These are for you." She unwrapped each one slowly, her face lighting up with each gift. When she got to the hair comb, she ran her fingers over it gently. "It is beautiful," she whispered. "I have never owned anything so fine." "You deserve fine things." She looked up at him then, and something passed between them, something that made the air in the cabin feel charged. He wanted to kiss her. He wanted it so badly his hands shook with the effort of holding himself back. But he did not want to ruin what they had, did not want to make her uncomfortable or feel obligated. She seemed to sense the tension, and she stood up slowly, still holding the hair comb. "Would you help me put this in my hair?" he nodded, not trusting his voice. She turned around, and he carefully gathered her dark hair in his hands, his fingers brushing against the soft skin of her neck as he worked the comb into place. He could feel her trembling slightly, could hear the way her breathing had quickened. When he finished, she turned back to face him, and they were standing so close he could see the flecks of gold in her hazel eyes. "Benjamin," she said softly. "Yes, I am glad I ended up in your stable that night. So am I." She reached up and touched his face gently, her small hand cupping his jaw. "You are a good man." He covered her hand with his own, holding it against his face. "Natalie, I need to tell you something." "What?" "I am falling in love with you. I think I have been since the moment I found you. I know this probably is not what you want to hear, and if it makes you uncomfortable, we can pretend I never said it. But I needed you to know." Her eyes widened, and for a moment he thought he had made a terrible mistake. Then she smiled, the most beautiful smile he had ever seen. "That is good, because I am falling in love with you too." He did not wait any longer. He bent his head and kissed her, gentle at first, then deeper when she responded by wrapping her arms around his neck. She tasted like the coffee they had shared that morning and something sweeter that was just her. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathless. "I have wanted to do that for weeks," he admitted. "So have I." They spent the rest of Christmas Day in a state of joyful discovery, stealing kisses between making dinner and exchanging stories of past Christmases. That night, when it came time for bed, Benjamin moved to make his usual bedroll by the fire, but Natalie stopped him. "You have been sleeping on the floor for weeks now," she said. "The bed is big enough for both of us, and we are in love. I trust you." He hesitated, wanting to do right by her. "Natalie, I do not want to compromise you. You are not. I am choosing this. I am choosing you." So they lay down together, fully clothed in the small bed. She curled up against his side, her head on his chest, and he wrapped his arms around her. It was the best night of sleep he had ever had. The winter months that followed were the happiest of Benjamin's life. He and Natalie fell deeper in love with each passing day. She learned to ride his gentlest horse, and they would take rides together when the weather allowed, her laughter ringing out as they raced through the snow-covered fields. He taught her to shoot, and she proved to be a good shot with steady hands. They cooked together, worked together, and spent their evenings curled up by the fire sharing stories and dreams for the future. He told her about wanting to expand his herd, about plans to build a bigger barn and maybe eventually a bigger house. She told him about wanting a family someday, about wanting to create the kind of warm, loving home she had known as a child. One night in late January, as they lay in bed together, she said, "What happens when spring comes?" He tightened his arms around her. "What do you mean?" "I told you I would stay through the winter. Spring is coming. Do you want me to leave?" "Leave?" "Natalie, I want you to stay forever. I want you to marry me." She propped herself up on one elbow to look at him, her eyes searching his face. "Are you proposing?" "I suppose I am, though I am making a mess of it. I should have gotten a ring first, should have planned something romantic. But yes, I am asking you to marry me. I love you. I want to build a life with you. I want to wake up next to you every morning for the rest of my life." "Yes," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, I will marry you." He kissed her then, a kiss that was full of promise and hope and love. When they pulled apart, they were both laughing and crying at the same time. "We will go into town tomorrow," he said. "I will buy you a ring and we will find someone to marry us. I do not need a fancy ring, I just need you. You are getting a ring anyway. You deserve everything good, and I am going to spend the rest of my life trying to give it to you." They rode into Shoshone the next day, and Benjamin bought her a simple gold band with a small diamond. It was not expensive, but when he slipped it onto her finger, she looked at it like it was the most precious thing in the world. They were married a week later by the circuit preacher who came through town. It was a simple ceremony with just a few witnesses, but Benjamin had never felt anything more profound than the moment he said his vows and promised to love and cherish Natalie for the rest of his life. Their wedding night was tender and sweet, full of love and discovery. In the morning, Benjamin woke with Natalie in his arms and felt a contentment he had never known was possible. She was his wife. This beautiful, strong, amazing woman had chosen him, and he would spend every day of his life making sure she never regretted it. Spring came, bringing green grass and wildflowers and the promise of new beginnings. Benjamin worked hard expanding his operation, and Natalie worked beside him, proving to be as capable with ranch work as she was with domestic tasks. They hired a hand to help with the growing herd, a young man named Tim who was respectful and hardworking. By summer, Natalie realized she was pregnant. When she told Benjamin, he picked her up and spun her around, both of them laughing with joy. He became even more protective of her, insisting she rest more and let him handle the heavier chores. She rolled her eyes at his overprotectiveness, but seemed touched by his care. As her belly grew, Benjamin found himself marveling at the miracle of it. He would place his hand on her stomach and feel their child moving inside her, and it would fill him with such overwhelming love and awe that he could barely speak. They spent evenings discussing names and making plans for the nursery they would build in the cabin. In late January of 1880, almost exactly 2 years after the night he found her in his stable, Natalie went into labor. It was a long, difficult labor that lasted through the night and into the next day. Benjamin stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her brow, telling her how strong she was and how much he loved her. Finally, as the sun was setting, their son was born. He came into the world screaming, red-faced and perfect. The midwife cleaned him up and placed him in Natalie's arms, and Benjamin watched his wife look down at their child with such love on her face that it brought tears to his eyes. "He is beautiful," she whispered. "He looks like you." "He has your nose," Benjamin said, touching the baby's tiny face with wonder. They named him William after Benjamin's father. He was a good baby, healthy and strong, and he quickly became the center of their world. Benjamin loved watching Natalie with their son, loved seeing her natural grace as a mother. She sang to William while she nursed him, the same songs her mother had sung to her. Life settled into a new rhythm with a baby in the house. Benjamin worked the ranch during the day while Natalie cared for William. In the evenings, they would sit together as a family, and Benjamin would hold his son while Natalie made dinner, his heart full to bursting with love for them both. When William was 6 months old, Benjamin started working on expanding the cabin. They needed more room, and he wanted to give his family a proper home. With Tim's help, he added 2 more rooms, one for William and one that could be a spare room for future children or guests. Over the next few years, their family continued to grow. 2 years after William was born, they had a daughter they named Emma, with her mother's hazel eyes and her father's dark hair. 2 years after that came another son, James, who was the spitting image of Benjamin but with his mother's temperament. The ranch prospered as well. Benjamin's hard work and smart business decisions paid off, and they were able to expand their herd significantly. They built a bigger barn and bought more land. They were not wealthy by any means, but they were comfortable, and they had everything they needed. Through it all, Benjamin and Natalie's love only deepened. Even after years of marriage, he still felt that spark when she walked into a room. She still blushed when he complimented her. They still talked for hours after the children were in bed, still found reasons to steal kisses throughout the day. One evening, in late fall of 1886, Benjamin sat on the porch of their expanded home, watching his children play in the yard. William was 8 now, tall for his age and already showing an interest in ranch work. Emma was 6, bright and curious, always asking questions about everything. James was 4, fearless and adventurous, keeping Natalie on her toes. Natalie came out and sat beside him, leaning her head on his shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" "I am thinking about how lucky I am, how one cold November night changed my entire life." She smiled and laced her fingers through his. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I had not stumbled into your stable that night? All the time. But I prefer to focus on what did happen. I found the love of my life sleeping in my stable. I gave her my bed and slept by the fire, never imagining that a few months later she would be sleeping beside me as my wife. I was so scared that night, she said softly. I thought I was going to die out there in the cold. And then I woke up in your cabin, and you were this gruff cowboy who was so gentle and kind. You saved my life, Benjamin. You saved mine too. I just did not know I needed saving until you came along. She turned to kiss him, a kiss that still held all the passion and love of their early days together, deepened now by years of partnership and shared experiences. Papa, Mama, Emma called from the yard. Come see what William taught me. They stood up, hands still linked, and walked down to join their children. As Benjamin watched his daughter proudly show off her new skill of skipping stones across the small pond he had built, with Natalie laughing beside him and his sons wrestling in the grass, he felt a profound gratitude for the life they had built together. That night, after the children were tucked into bed and the house was quiet, Benjamin and Natalie lay in their bed talking softly. You have any regrets? He asked her. About staying here instead of going to California like you had planned. She was quiet for a moment, considering. No. Not a single one. My life turned out better than any plans I had made. I have a home, a family, a husband who loves me. I have everything I ever wanted and so much more than I ever dreamed possible. Good, because I plan on keeping you here with me for the rest of our lives. That is exactly where I want to be. They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms as they had done countless nights before and would do countless nights to come. The years continued to pass in a rhythm of seasons and growth. William grew into a fine young man, taking on more responsibility on the ranch, and showing the same work ethic and integrity his father had instilled in him. Emma became a skilled rider and developed her mother's talent for cooking, often helping Natalie prepare meals for the family and the ranch hands they now employed. James inherited his father's way with horses and could gentle even the most skittish animals with patience and a soft voice. The children were close, looking out for each other the way Benjamin and Natalie had taught them families should. In 1889, Benjamin and Natalie celebrated their 10th wedding anniversary. Benjamin took her into Shoshone for a rare evening out, leaving the children with Tim and his wife, who had become trusted friends over the years. They had dinner at the town's nicest restaurant and danced together in the street when they heard music playing from the saloon. I feel like a young girl again, Natalie said, laughing as he twirled her. You are still young, and you are still the most beautiful woman I have ever seen. She kissed him right there in the street, not caring who saw. I love you, Benjamin Carter. Thank you for giving me such a wonderful life. Thank you for saying yes when I asked you to stay. Thank you for taking a chance on a lonely cowboy who did not know how empty his life was until you filled it. When they returned home that night, the children were asleep, and they sat together on the porch under the stars, the same stars that had shone on that cold November night 12 years ago when their story began. Tell me about that night again, Natalie said. When you found me. Benjamin smiled. He had told this story many times over the years, but she never seemed to tire of hearing it. I was sleeping when I heard the horses making noise. I got up and went to the stable, thinking it was a wild animal. Instead, I found the most beautiful woman I had ever seen, half frozen in the hay. I was not beautiful, I was a mess. You were beautiful, you still are, you always will be. You carried me to the cabin even though you did not know me. You gave me your bed and slept by the fire to make sure I was comfortable and safe. Why did you do that? I told you. I could not just leave you there. But you did more than just help me. You made me feel valued, respected, cared for. You treated me like I mattered when I had spent so long feeling like I did not matter to anyone." He pulled her closer, kissing the top of her head. "You matter. You have always mattered. You matter to me, to our children, to everyone whose life you touch. You are the heart of this family, the heart of this home." She was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. "Sometimes I still cannot believe this is my life. That I get to wake up every morning next to you, that I have 3 beautiful children, that I have a home where I feel safe and loved. It is more than I ever dared to dream. It is more than I dreamed too, but we built it together. And we are going to keep building it together for the rest of our lives." As they sat there under the stars, Benjamin reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From that cold November night to this perfect evening, every step had led them exactly where they were meant to be. He had been a lonely cowboy with an empty cabin and a quiet life. She had been a desperate young woman with nowhere to go and no one to turn to. Together, they had created something beautiful. A family. A home. A love that had weathered every storm and grown stronger with each passing year. The next morning, Benjamin woke early as always and lay for a moment watching Natalie sleep beside him. Even after all these years, he still felt grateful every single morning that she had chosen him, that she had stayed, that she had built this life with him. She stirred and opened her eyes, smiling when she saw him watching her. "Good morning. Good morning, beautiful." She stretched and curled into his side. "Do we have to get up yet?" "Not yet. The children are still sleeping." They lay there in comfortable silence for a few minutes before Natalie spoke again. "I have been thinking about something." "What is that?" "We have done well with the ranch. We have a comfortable life. What if we did something to help other people who are in situations like I was? Women who are traveling alone, who have nowhere to go, who need help." Benjamin considered this. "What did you have in mind?" "We could offer room and board to women passing through. Nothing permanent, just a safe place to stay while they figure out their next steps. We have the room now, and we have the resources. We could make a real difference for people who need it." He thought about the woman he had found in his stable all those years ago, about how easily she could have died if he had not been there. About how many other women might be in similar situations, desperate and alone with nowhere to turn. "I think that is a wonderful idea," he said. "We can start small, maybe put the word out that we have a room available for women travelers who need a safe place to stay." Her face lit up. "Really? You mean it, of course. You are right. We have been blessed, and we should share those blessings with others who need help." She kissed him soundly. "This is why I love you. You have the kindest heart of anyone I have ever known." Over the next few years, their home became known throughout the region as a safe haven for women traveling alone. They never turned anyone away, and they never asked for payment. Some women stayed just a night or two before moving on. Others stayed weeks or even months while they figured out their next steps. Natalie took each woman under her wing, offering not just shelter and food but also advice, encouragement, and practical skills. She taught several women how to cook and sew, skills that helped them find work. She helped others write letters to family members they had been estranged from. She listened to their stories with compassion and without judgment. Benjamin supported her efforts completely, even when it meant their home was crowded and their resources stretched thin. He saw how much joy it brought Natalie to help others, and he loved her even more for her generous heart. Their children grew up seeing their parents' example of kindness and hospitality, and it shaped who they became. William, in particular, seemed to inherit his mother's compassion, often going out of his way to help the women who stayed with them feel welcome. One evening in the spring of 1895, a young woman arrived at their door. She was about 20 years old, thin and exhausted, with a baby in her arms. Her name was Sarah, and she had been abandoned by the father of her child and turned out by her family. Natalie welcomed her in immediately, setting her up in the spare room and making sure she and the baby had everything they needed. Sarah stayed with them for 3 months, and during that time, Benjamin noticed his son William paying special attention to her, helping her with the baby and talking to her for hours. When Sarah finally left to take a job as a school teacher in a neighboring town, William was heartbroken. But he kept in touch with her through letters, and 2 years later, he asked Benjamin's permission to ask for her hand in marriage. Benjamin gave his blessing gladly, seeing in William and Sarah the same kind of love he and Natalie shared. The wedding was held at the ranch in the summer of 1897, and as Benjamin watched his son marry the woman he loved, he thought about how life had a way of coming full circle. William and Sarah had fallen in love in the same house where he and Natalie had fallen in love. Both stories starting with a woman in need finding safety and kindness in their home. Emma married a few years later to a man from town who owned the general store, and they gave Benjamin and Natalie their first grandchildren, twin girls who were the light of their lives. James stayed on the ranch, working alongside his father and eventually taking over more of the daily operations as Benjamin got older. In 1900, Benjamin and Natalie celebrated their 22nd wedding anniversary and Benjamin's 50th birthday. Their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a big celebration. And as Benjamin looked around at all the faces of the family they had created, he felt overwhelmed with gratitude. That night, after everyone had left and they were alone in their room, Natalie came to him and took his hand. "I have something I want to give you." She led him outside and across the yard to the stable. He followed, curious, as she opened the door and lit a lantern. She led him to the very spot where he had found her all those years ago. "This is where our story began," she said softly. "You found me here, scared and alone and half frozen. You saved my life, but more than that, you gave me a reason to want to keep living. You gave me love and family and a home. You gave me everything." "Natalie," he said, his voice rough with emotion. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small wooden box. "I have been working on this for months. Open it." He opened the box to find a silver pocket watch. On the back was engraved a date, November 20th, 1878, and the words, "The night everything changed." Below that was another date, February 14th, 1879, and the words, "The day I said yes." "This is beautiful," he whispered, running his thumb over the engraving. "I wanted you to have something that marked the most important dates of our lives. The night you found me and the night you asked me to marry you. Those 2 nights changed everything." He pulled her into his arms and held her close, this woman who had been the center of his world for over 2 decades. "I love you so much. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. You are the best thing that ever happened to me too. Thank you for finding me. Thank you for keeping me. Thank you for loving me." They stood there in the stable for a long time, holding each other, remembering the night that had started it all. Then they walked back to their house, hand in hand, just as they had walked through every day of their lives together. The years continued to pass, bringing more grandchildren, more joy, and inevitably, more challenges. There were hard winters and dry summers, sick animals and failed crops. There were losses too, friends who passed away, parents of friends who died, the inevitable march of time that took people they cared about. But through it all, Benjamin and Natalie faced everything together, their love a constant source of strength and comfort. They still held hands when they walked. They still kissed good morning and good night. They still talked for hours, still laughed at each other's jokes, still looked at each other like they were the most important person in the world. On their 30th wedding anniversary in 1909, their entire extended family gathered at the ranch for a massive celebration. Their children had given them a total of 8 grandchildren now, with another on the way. The house rang with laughter and music, and Benjamin looked around at the life they had built with wonder. Emma stood up to give a toast. "I want to say something about my parents," she said, her voice carrying across the crowded room. "Growing up, I watched them build this life together. I watched them work side by side, support each other through hard times and celebrate together in good times. They taught us what real love looks like, not just in the big dramatic moments, but in the everyday choices to be kind, to be patient, to put each other first." William stood up next. "They also taught us that love is not just for family. They opened their home and their hearts to so many women who needed help over the years. They showed us that when you have been given much, you should give back freely. I met my wife because of their generosity, and I will be forever grateful for their example." James raised his glass. "To the best parents anyone could ask for, thank you for everything you have given us, and for showing us what it means to build a life based on love and kindness." Everyone raised their glasses, and Benjamin felt tears stinging his eyes. Natalie squeezed his hand, and when he looked at her, he saw she was crying too. "We did good," he whispered to her. "We did amazing," she whispered back. As the years advanced into their 60s and then 70s, Benjamin and Natalie slowed down but never stopped. They handed over most of the ranch operations to James, who ran it with the same dedication his father had. But they still woke early every morning, still sat on their porch every evening, still found reasons to hold each other close. They celebrated their 40th anniversary in 1919 and their 50th in 1929. By then, they were in their 70s, but the love in their eyes when they looked at each other was as strong as it had been on their wedding day. Their grandchildren became adults and started families of their own, and Benjamin and Natalie were blessed to meet several great-grandchildren before the end of their lives. Each new baby was presented to them with pride, another branch on the family tree they had planted all those years ago. In the fall of 1932, 54 years after that fateful November night, Benjamin became ill. He was 78 years old, and his body was finally giving out after a lifetime of hard work. Natalie, 76 herself, refused to leave his side, sleeping in a chair next to his bed and caring for him with the same tenderness he had shown her on that long-ago night. One evening, as the sun was setting and painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Benjamin reached for her hand. "Natalie, I need to tell you something." "What is it, my love?" "I have had a wonderful life. Every day with you has been a gift. I do not have any regrets." "Do not talk like that. You are going to be fine." He smiled gently. "We both know that is not true, but it is okay. I am not afraid. I have lived a full life, loved you completely, and watched our family grow. I am ready." She was crying now, holding his hand to her face. "I am not ready to let you go. You will never have to let me go. I will always be with you in every corner of this ranch we built together, in the faces of our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Our love does not end just because I do. I love you so much, Benjamin Carter. You are the love of my life, and you are mine. Thank you for staying all those years ago. Thank you for building this beautiful life with me. Thank you for every single day." He died peacefully that night, with Natalie holding his hand and their children gathered around his bed. His last words were, "I love you." Natalie lived for 5 more years after Benjamin's death, surrounded by the family they had created together. She never remarried, saying that she had been blessed with one great love, and that was enough for any lifetime. She spent her remaining years telling stories about Benjamin to anyone who would listen, making sure their grandchildren and great-grandchildren knew what kind of man he had been. On a cold November night in 1937, 59 years to the day after Benjamin had found her in his stable, Natalie passed away peacefully in her sleep. She was buried next to Benjamin under a large oak tree on the ranch they had built together, their graves marked with a simple headstone that read, "Benjamin and Natalie Carter, together forever." November 20th, 1878. The ranch stayed in the family, passed down through the generations, each one adding their own chapter to the story. But the tale that was told most often, the story that became family legend, was the story of how it all began, on a cold November night in 1878 when a cowboy found a woman sleeping in his stable, gave her his bed, slept by the fire, and found the love of his life. Their love story became the foundation on which generations built their lives, a reminder that sometimes the greatest blessings come in the most unexpected ways, and that true love, once found, never really ends. The house they lived in still stands, and in the stable, in the very spot where Benjamin found Natalie, there is a plaque that tells their story, ensuring that what they built together will never be forgotten.